Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. Michael Matt for the Remnant Forum. So the election is coming up, and everyone's abuzz about that. I'm trying to get up for it. Over the years, I've sat out a few of these presidential runs because they just seem so ridiculous, and kind of long ago gave up on the conservative and name-only Republicans in their con game. When Bob Dole was propped up there a few years back, I think that was my last straw. I remember writing in the name John Wayne when I went to vote, because even though Wayne had been dead for several decades, I still thought he was a better choice than Bob Dole. You know, you just get tired of it all. I mean, how coincidental was it, for example, that every conservative GOP president, back to Ronaldus Maximus himself, Ronald Reagan, had a pro-abort for a wife? How does that work again? Because I'm unclear. How do you stand up there in front of God and everybody claiming to be a champion of the unborn on the one hand, and then deeply in love with your lovely First Lady, the pro-abort in favor of baby killing, on the other? I never understood how that worked, and I don't think it does, and I think it's part of the con game. It's part of what we call politics, I guess. So Trump, I mean, who knows? This guy, he's no saint, but he did do one thing. He just ripped the mask off of a rhino, which is kind of interesting. Matter of fact, I kind of like that. That's long overdue. I am so tired of the rhinos and their deceit, their obvious deceit, trying to really clumsily to fool everyone who is pro-life and pro-family in this country into believing that they're conservatives. But, everyone's asking the question, can we vote for Donald Trump, the divorced reality TV show guy? Really? Is that where we're at now? It seems preposterous on its face. But let's think about this for a moment. First off, I think it's really important to realize that we're not talking about choosing the lesser of two evils here. Catholics can never choose evil, period. That's the end of that. What we are talking about is something in moral theology we've all heard of. Is called the principle of double effect, which means it allows us to do something that has both a good and an evil effect, so long as our act itself is not evil, and so long as the good that comes from the act outweighs the evil. So this means, in a nutshell, that casting a vote for a weak and even a very sinful politician is, in fact, an option so long as we're choosing that which could result in a greater good. So this is the debate. This is what we're talking about here, in a nutshell. It has nothing to do with drinking copious amounts of GOP Kool-Aid and being fooled by Donald Trump, the conservative. That's not what's going on here. There's something a little more nuanced than that. What we're talking about is simply doing what is best for the protection of our hearth and home for our children. And whether or not a big, braggadocious businessman like Trump might just be arrogant enough to make good on some of the promises that he's made. We don't have much more to go on. America is not a Christian country anymore. But there is nothing wrong with good men and women doing whatever they can within a very corrupt system like ours to slow down the advance of civilizational collapse and to buy time they need to raise their children. There's nothing wrong with this, so long as it involves choosing something which can result in more good than evil. Let's consider a few of the goods then, the potential goods that could come from this. Like, for example, I like Trump on immigration. I think he's spot on. He's the only one that's actually talking common sense on border control. And if he gets in, I can reasonably expect at least the possibility that my children will be safer than they are now. That's a good. On Islam, sure. Close the borders to terrorists, duh. Trump just makes sense on this, and it will lead to the good of preventing more terrorism in some of our cities. That's a good thing. I'd like to see a lot less people getting blown up and killed all over the place. Trump's not really a New World Order guy. Trump's a businessman. He has everything to do with protecting the borders and protecting his interest in his company, which is what I think how he looks at America. How about Second Amendment issues? Donald Trump has the endorsement of the NRA. Now, I don't believe that anyone should fool himself into thinking that he can shoot his way out of this mess. That's just silly, Hollywood fantasy. Obviously, a Second Amendment supporter in the White House, however, is a direct shot to the solar plexus of the nanny state-promoting big government wackos on the left. And I like that. Yes, I like that. Religious freedom. I don't even believe, those of you who read The Remnant know that we don't even believe in religious liberty, of course, because that was a Freemasonic construct that was used to undermine the Catholic confessional state. But now, religious liberty is one of the promises that this great American system makes to us. Now, Trump is going to support religious liberty. much more so than this crazy hag Hillary Clinton, who has promised to shoot it down. Take a look at this clip.
Yes, we've cut the maternal mortality rate in half, but far too many women are still denied critical access to reproductive health care and safe childbirth. All the laws we've passed don't count for much if they're not enforced. Rights have to exist in practice, not just on paper. Laws have to be backed up with resources and political will, and deep-seated cultural codes, religious beliefs, and structural biases have to be changed.
You know, she means it. This woman is a heartless, soulless, power-hungry megalomaniac. And I don't know about you, but I'm not eager to see what happens to my kids after 8 years of this freak in the White House. So the potential good here is starting to add up. Security for our children, maybe, the ability to practice our faith without police state interference, the protection of the common good from terrorists and, gangs running around and crossing over the borders from all directions. Is all of this guaranteed with Trump? Of course not. We're talking about a crapshoot here to some extent. Of course it's not guaranteed, but it's a maybe with Trump. It's a never, not on your life with Hillary Clinton. So how about something like homeschooling? Let's consider that. Guys like me who are raising whole packs of little kids right now are really concerned about a Hillary win in November. Hillary, it takes a village Clinton, is no fan of homeschooling. She's a big believer in Common Core, and she will do all that she can to make home education more government regulated and even illegal if possible.
I'm a tremendous believer in education, but education has to be at a local level. We cannot have the bureaucrats in Washington telling you how to manage your child's education. So Common Core is a total disaster.
So homeschooling isn't your concern? Fine. It is for me, and it is for a lot of people. And on this single issue alone, some people are saying, I got to raise my kids. I have to be able to homeschool them to save their souls. So I might actually hold my breath and vote even for Donald Trump to protect homeschooling. And that particular good far outweighs the potential evil for them. Look, I don't trust Donald Trump on a lot of issues. But he's not going to go after homeschooling. He's not going to go after the First and Second Amendments, as Hillary has promised to do. And he might just do something, I don't know what, but maybe something, to stop the slaughter and violence in our cities that results from terrorism and illegal immigration and so forth. Some of our folks can't bring themselves to vote for Trump, and they have lots of good reasons for this. But we don't need to rip each other's faces off over this. I think they need to just follow their consciences, but then also realize that there are other good folks, especially homeschooling families, who have been fearing the rise of Hillary Clinton for decades and believe that they now need to step up and do something to see to it that this anti-homeschooling, anti-family demon never gets elected. And this doesn't mean that they're big fans of the Donald or drinking GOP Kool-Aid by the tankerful. Chris Ferrara, I'm tired of being told that if we don't vote GOP, we're going to pay for it at the level of the Supreme Court. So help me understand, brother. How true is it this time? How true is it? What happens to this country? What happens to the Supreme Court if Hillary Clinton wins in November?
Well, you can see in the gay marriage decisions, and the court here has imposed upon the entire country, contrary to the laws of states that reject gay marriage, the idea that men can marry each other and women can marry each other. It's a fundamental question of liberty. And liberty, according to the secular mentality of the court's liberal majority, is essentially what Patrick Brennan has called great big liberty, liberty to do anything you please. So this is fundamentally a moral issue that is coming before the court again and again, and the judicial conservatives are now outnumbered. So we're going to get 5-4 decisions in these areas, abortion, gay marriage, and so forth, that are going to result in catastrophic outcomes and the overturning of state legislatures when they attempt to roll back the zeitgeist and restore some sanity at the state level. So I think we've reached a critical juncture with the court. You've got to understand what the court is these days and what it always was inherently. This court, as it is constituted, the Supreme Court, under Article 3 of the Constitution, is when it comes to questions of liberty and laws of application throughout the country, even in commercial disputes, it's the Supreme Court by its very nature. It's supreme. Its decisions as the highest of the Article 3 courts under the Supremacy Clause of Article 6, Clause 2 of the Constitution, constitute, and I'm quoting from the Constitution, the supreme law of the land. What's so hard to understand about that? The libertarians pretend that this wasn't the problem with the Constitution from the very beginning. So what we have in the Supreme Court is effectively, in these cases involving liberty, a super legislature. Now, the thing about Trump is, we all know what the problems are with the man. We all know about his multiple marriages. We all know that he is about as much of a Christian as Barack Obama is when all is said and done. The problem is that we have to assess the credibility of his claim that he will appoint from a list of 11 appointees justices to the Supreme Court who are pretty much in the mold of Scalia, perhaps not quite as right-wing in American terms as he, but certainly to the right of Kennedy, from what I can see from this list. So what we're looking at here is the potential for a series of 5-4 decisions, undoing a lot of the damage the liberal wing has done with its recent 5-4 decisions, assisted by the swing vote of Justice Kennedy. So the stakes are enormous. Now, here's the problem. Do you believe Trump when he says, unlike any candidate before him, that I am committed to appointing from this list of 11 names replacement justices to the Supreme Court? If you believe him, and we're looking at the potential for 2 to 3 additional appointments, perhaps even more, then, as I say, the stakes are enormous and the gains could be tremendous because, again, we're dealing with a super legislature. And this super legislature can just as quickly undo a lot of the damage the Supreme Court has done over the last 10 years in these social issue cases. On the other hand, if you don't believe him, and this is a matter for you to decide in the forum of your own conscience, then maybe the choice isn't so starkly apparent to you. But if you believe him, then I would say that if your conviction is he's telling you the truth about this, and that there's a real prospect of 2 to 3 replacement justices who would reverse some of these horrendous 5-4 decisions, then you've got a serious moral problem that you have to address. And I would say here the principle of double effect applies. When you vote for Trump for this reason alone, and I think this reason alone is sufficient for me, I speak only for myself, you're not endorsing any of his other positions. You're not endorsing the horrendous spectacle we saw at the Republican National Convention where Peter Thiel gets up and says he's proud to be gay. In other words, proud to be someone who has a predilection for unnatural sexual behavior and gets a standing ovation from the Republican National Convention. We're not voting for that. We're not voting for his liberal attitudes. We're not voting for any of the things he said or done in the past. We're voting with the intention of, in this case, preventing Hillary Clinton from cementing in place for decades to come a liberal tyranny from this court, which will make what the court has done thus far pale in comparison. This is a pretty clear choice.
Yeah, so I can hear your critics saying, we voted for Bush at one point, and who did he try to give us? He tried to give us Harriet Miers. We voted for Reagan before that, and he gave us Justice Antonin Scalia, which arguably is the best we ever could have hoped for. And even guys like Christopher Ferrara wrote articles taking issue with some of what Scalia stood for with respect to strict constitutionalism and so forth. What's your answer to that?
Well, these are all legitimate points. I can't deny that they are legitimate points and that we are in a very sticky ethical situation here. Again, it comes down to this. Sure, Bush said he would appoint conservative justices, but he didn't give us a list, and he didn't give us the names to vet in advance of the election to assure ourselves that these people he has identified would move the court rightward. I hate to use that kind of terminology about a court, but that's what we're dealing with. Again, a super legislature. Mm-hmm. And you want a right-wing super legislature. And I think we have an obligation, if we believe Trump, and again, that's the caveat, if you believe him. I happen to believe him. I don't think he can back out of this commitment. If you believe him, I think the peril alone involved in letting that witch fill up the Supreme Court with 2 or 3 more ideologues, that alone would justify holding your nose and voting for Trump. Again, I speak for myself. I'm not telling anyone that he's morally obliged to vote for Trump. But I would say that if you are convinced that he could prevent a debacle on the Supreme Court and that he will do so, you have a powerful reason to vote for him. Let's keep in mind, elections are exercises of prudential judgment. No candidate in any election that any of us has voted in his or her lifetime is going to comport completely with Catholic social teaching. They all more or less depart from it. Even the great Reagan was a divorcee and in many respects a rank liberal by Catholic standards. Yet no one was saying it would be immoral to vote for Reagan at the time he was running. This is the situation in which we find ourselves. Not that we're endorsing the defects in a candidate, but that under the principle of double effect, we intend to avoid some great harm to the common good so that we're voting for that intention, not with the intention of supporting the candidate's other positions, which might be morally defective. Consider this historical example. In the elections of 1946 and 1948, Pius XII issued declarations with his full authority telling the voters of Italy that they had a duty under pain of mortal sin to vote against the communists in those elections. And the alternatives were the Christian Democrats, which was the basic party in opposition to the Communist Party, and various other smaller parties, none of whose platforms were perfectly consistent with Catholic teaching. Yet this is what he said, and I'm quoting from his declarations. He said in a discourse to pastors and Lenten preachers on March 16, 1946, "The exercise of the right to vote is an act of grave responsibility, at least when there is the question involved of electing those whose office it will be to give the country its constitutions and its laws." This is the Supreme Court by analogy. "Particularly those which affect, for example, the sanctification of feast days, marriage, family life, and school, the various phases of social life. It therefore falls to the Church to explain to the faithful their moral duties which derive from their right to vote." And the situation became even more critical in the election of 1948, at which time he declared, "It is your right and duty to draw the attention of the faithful to the extraordinary importance of the coming elections and to the moral responsibility which follows from it for those who have the right to vote. In the present circumstances, it is strictly obligatory for whoever has the right, man or woman, to take part in the elections. He who abstains, particularly through indolence or cowardice, commits thereby a grave sin, a mortal offense." And again, he's speaking in the context of electoral politics where you don't have perfection. And every candidate more or less falls short of the Catholic standard. And the Catholic standard should be adhered to. And we personally all have to adhere to it. But when we're faced with political choices that involve mitigating harm to the common good, I don't think you can simply say, "Oh, forget it, I'll abstain."
I want to push it a little further here because I took a little bit more of the time that I usually, we usually split at the beginning of the show. I went on for quite a bit because my objective right now is to end something that I see happening online, which is for me, is very concerning, and that is this election is blowing apart good people. A lot of traditional Catholics are right in there, and they're smacking each other around. And I think we got to prevent this. I want to ask the author of Liberty, the God That Failed, a guy that understands the flaws in the American system. I want you to say something to the fellow who says to you, "Chris, I'm opting out of this system. I read your book. The whole thing is crazy. It's Antichrist the King. I want nothing to do with it." What do you say to that fellow, to that critic?
Well, if he's read the book carefully, he wouldn't be saying, "Well, I've read the book and I'm opting out of the system," because the whole point of the final chapter of the book is to explain that I'm not saying abandon democracy and retreat into a cave somewhere. I'm saying, on the contrary, pointing to the examples of Nicaragua and Hungary, where the zeitgeist was rolled back by democratic means, in Nicaragua by the total abolition of abortion, in Hungary by the adoption of a new Christian constitution. I'm saying that democracy provides a framework in which a sufficiently motivated electorate can turn things around, and that we have a duty to try to do that. That's what Leo said in his encyclical Libertas. He said we have a duty to attempt to bring back, within the framework of democracy, all of society to the form and pattern of Catholic social order within the limitations imposed upon us. And those who say that they're abstaining, well, I'm not going to condemn them as being morally incorrect or even that they're committing a sin, but you certainly can't take from the book that I wrote any conclusion that the solution is to opt out. On the contrary, my argument is to opt in.
Good.
And that the bishop should be telling us all to opt in and telling us who to vote for. And that's another aspect of Trump's candidacy. That is very interesting to me. Why, maybe this is providential, would he, of all issues, make it a centerpiece of his campaign the abolition of the Johnson Amendment, which is that pernicious provision of the Internal Revenue Code that gags nonprofit organizations who are not specifically authorized to lobby from taking positions on elections, especially religious organizations, including churches, including my organization. Here I have to speak in my personal capacity about elections because my organization can't take a position under the Johnson Amendment. The Catholic Church can't take a position under the Johnson Amendment without losing its tax exemption. You could argue that perhaps they should let the tax exemption fall by the wayside. But that's a mighty club with which to beat religionists over the head. And so it's very curious to me, very interesting, fascinating even, that Trump would focus on the Johnson Amendment and promise to do everything he can to repeal it so that churches can engage in political activity, which they have every right to do. Because where these questions of liberty are concerned, religion and morality intersect, as the church has always taught, with politics.
Yeah.
And churchmen have every right to say specifically, as Pius XII said, you can't vote for that party. You must turn out and vote against that party. So that's another aspect of his candidacy that really intrigues me. Am I saying that you have to believe him, that you're morally compelled to take him at his word? No. But I am saying that if you do find him credible on the issue of Supreme Court appointments and on the repeal of the Johnson Amendment, those are two issues that provide a pretty compelling reason to vote Republican while holding your nose as to all the other issues. Again, under the principle of double effect. We're not endorsing the defects in the platform. We're intending to do good, and the unintended consequence would be there's some sort of implicit recognition that we're putting up with the rest of this nonsense because we have no choice in the matter.
Yeah.
We're not endorsing it, and we're not voting for it.
And we're certainly trying to buy ourselves as much time as we possibly can, which is well within our rights to do. You know, so you think about a Donald Trump. I mean, I don't know about you, but I was actually somewhat surprised by the caliber of his kids. And I'm not trying to make a blanket endorsement of all of his children, but there was something wholesome about the expression of love between father and sons and daughter and father and so forth. Again, the divorces are wow. How did all this work into that? The one son, I think his son Donald Jr. has 5 children. There's just some interesting things about this man that are worth looking at any rate. And you see the response that America's sort of blue collar regular guy Tea Party people are having for him, and you say to yourself, at least for the next 4 years, Trump is going to want to keep that constituency happy. So we're going to have conservatism for 4 years on a certain level, which will buy us the time, hopefully, possibly, to get something done here. People really are outraged by what's happening.
Well, here's a way that you could look at it. What we're looking at right now in American politics is a reality TV show. A reality TV show with real-world consequences. When you watch a reality TV show, you're looking about the lives of other people. And, well, you might want to waste your time watching something like that to see what happens in the lives of these other people. But this reality TV show involves our lives. These are characters, if you will, in an ongoing drama, media-generated to a large extent, and they're all characters in this reality TV show. But when they participate in this reality TV show, they're wielding the levers of political power. And that's going to affect each of us individually. So if you find the Trump character in this reality TV show convincing, then in a kind of bizarre way, you should push your button and vote for that character and see what happens. At the very least, there's a promise being made, and this particular character in the reality TV show is worried about his ratings, perhaps, in other words, the next election.
Yeah.
So perhaps if you support him in the reality TV show / talent contest, whatever you want to call it, by sending in your electronic vote at the voting booth, maybe we'll get the result that he's promising.
Yeah, right.
It sounds almost ridiculous, but there's a certain truth to it.
It's funny, I got an email right before this show started today where a friend from a reader of The Remnant in England said, if you guys don't want Donald Trump, please send him out here. And I know exactly, I know what he's talking about. I mean, my friends in France, they've never heard a president of France say that he's pro-life?
We want to uphold the sanctity and dignity of life.
I mean, that to them is Christmas and Easter and happy birthday. They can't even imagine the fantasy of a President Hollande, for example, saying, I'm pro-life. Even if they think it's just politics and he doesn't mean it. If for some reason the President of France felt that he had to, for political reasons, claim to be pro-life, that would be a massive thing, a good thing for them. So, it's funny, good old US of A, where in a sense we're still walking in some tall cotton compared to our friends across the pond, which just can't even imagine this opportunity.
Well, I can't end this segment with you without mentioning another bizarre development in the neo-Catholic blogosphere. I mean, what is going on with these kooky characters? In particular, Mr. Shea, who is now saying not only should you not vote for Trump, you're morally obliged to vote for Hillary. Is he out of his mind?
Oh, boy.
What is it with these bloggers? Is it their mission to be as controversial as possible in their total rejection of everything traditional Catholics stand for? There's no clickbait involved. You can't possibly be garnering more support with such nonsense. This woman is a demon from hell.
Yeah.
She's obviously in favor of gay marriage, abortion on demand. She's completely contrary to Catholic social teaching and her support for so-called free trade, including the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which Trump opposes. On you tick every box regarding the opposite of Catholic teaching on every one of these issues. She ticks those boxes, and even if you say Trump's paying only lip service to the elements of Catholic teaching we're talking about, especially the pro-life element, Hillary is an avowed enemy of everything the church stands for. And this character Cain, are you kidding me? The neo-Catholic bloggers are actually going to try to pass this man off as some sort of traditional Catholic? Bishop Tobin just came out and said the man cannot claim credibly to be a Catholic politician.
Yeah.
His positions are the antithesis of church teaching. He's in favor of abortion on demand because it's the law of the land, and he's personally opposed to it, he says. That's utter rubbish. That is the classic liberal disjunction between public and private morality. It's simply a heresy. It's the American heresy of the schizophrenic politician who believes one thing and does another thing in public life. And the neo-Catholic blogosphere is lining up behind Hillary Clinton. They are completely dysfunctional at this point. Get them out of your browsers. Enough with these clowns.
I think, Chris, that we're short on time, but I think that Trump is not necessarily leading what's happening. I don't know if I've fleshed this all out completely or not even in my own mind, but it seems to me he's seen an opportunity. This is not another Mitt Romney or another John McCain. This is a guy who saw an opportunity. He sees all of these people in the United States, and we're talking about millions, a high percentage of our countrymen, are fed up, they're afraid, they're seeing the failed liberal policies lead to blood in the streets all over the place, dead cops, dead kids. So there really is something different now. This isn't just the usual rhino GOP nonsense, let's pretend to be a conservative. Trump is tapping into something very genuine and very real, and in a sense, he's being led by them. He's being led by the true conservatives who are left, the regular people who are left, who are fed up with this. And so it does make it for a little different scenario.
Something's going on here because this guy has no idea how to conduct a standard American-style campaign. He's made one gaffe after another, one crude remark after another, and as often as he does this, it seems to improve his standing.
Yeah.
People are so fed up with the smooth-talking slickster in the political establishment that the guy's in very ineptitude in terms of being a slickster makes him appealing.
Yeah.
He's riding a wave of growing fear and horror of what Americans see looming before them. It's the abyss. Maybe they don't see the abyss in that sense, but they see the abyss in other aspects of it, the Islamization of Europe, and the economic collapse of our independent status as an economic producer for the sake of free trade, and other indications of the New World Order that everyone seems to be alarmed about, even people in the Bernie Sanders camp.
Yeah.
And here's Hillary, who's in the pocket of the globalist interests, riding to victory. And now, of course, Bernie Sanders is knuckling under and saying we really do have to vote for Hillary, even though they stole it from me and engineered it so that I never had a chance. And Trump, by the way, is capitalizing on that beautifully, I think, with another one of his informal remarks today, showing that the system is, in fact, rigged. People are rebelling against it. He's capitalizing on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Chris, we're out of time. I'm sure we're going to have plenty of opportunities to do more programs on this. This is only going to keep going. It's an interesting thing to watch, and there's a lot of people. But just as a final last word here for this show, folks, don't let this blow us apart. Not us. We're all on the same page here. We understand what's going on. People are taking a little different strategic approach to what to do in November. That doesn't mean that that we should be blowing ourselves apart or in any way allowing ourselves to be polarized by this very system. And I'll give you the last word.
Well, there's a legitimate difference of opinion here. No one is saying you're compelled to vote for Trump, that you're engaging in conduct amounting to a mortal sin if you sit it out. I cite the examples of Pius XII only to indicate there was a clear situation between the choice between communism, which would have been a disaster for Italy, and other parties which were less of a disaster. In my view, the same situation applies analogously here. It's a prudential judgment. You can disagree with me, but think it over.
Yeah, right.
It's not as simple as you might think.
Thanks very much, Chris. We'll talk to you very soon, and have a great day.
You too, Mike.
All right, see you.
Bye-bye.
That'll do it for us, folks. I am Michael Matt, coming to you from the Archdiocese of Minneapolis and St. Paul for Remnant TV. Thanks so much. Keep the old faith, have a great day, and enjoy the apocalypse. I'll see you next time.